What's up, everyone? Merry Christmas Eve to everyone out there. Today is December 24th, 2025, and in today's video, we're going to look at some news from over this past weekend. On Saturday, December 20th, many neighborhoods in San Francisco directly adjacent to the Golden Gate Bridge suffered a power outage following a fire at a local power facility. In the state of California, further south down in the Los Angeles area, the very next day, Call of Duty creator Vince Zampella was reportedly killed in a Ferrari crash on a state highway in the area. And these are the two stories we're going to focus on today and talk about how these two seemingly unrelated events are part of the same numerical riddle. So we got a lot to cover today, and I want to spend some time talking about the synchronicity of these news events before I get too deep into the numerology. Now, for starters, I want to look back at some of my more recent videos and how all of this has been connected to the Pope ever since my video on Miami's MLS Cup win. There's been a huge papal riddle, and it's all connected to the first American pope to ever be elected, Pope Leo. The Pope is also called the Pontiff of the Catholic Church. Now, the word pontiff comes from Latin pontifex, which literally translates to bridge builder. And of course, we saw a lot of syncs with Pope Francis and the Golden Gate Bridge. Remember the Francis Scott Key bridge collapsed last year? Well, now we have another pope with the name Francis. There you see his middle name, Robert Francis Prevost. And this blackout occurring near the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco. This is part of the riddle I've been talking about lately. In my video on Marge versus the monorail, I talked about how the murders of Rob and Michelle Reiner were connected to another double stabbing in Los Angeles and the O.J. Simpson double murders in 1994. Now, of course, Rob Reiner attended a party at Conan O'Brien's house the night before. Conan was famously a writer on The Simpsons and was best known for this episode, which featured Phil Hartman, who was another Hollywood celebrity who was killed by a family member. I talked more about this riddle in my video on Greg Biffle, because the last name Biffle technically means buffalo, and the Buffalo Bills were the team that O.J. Simpson spent the vast majority of his career with. Now, O.J. Simpson passed away last year on the date April 10th, which just so happened to be 2 days after the second Great American Total Solar Eclipse to pass over the United States. So now we get a news story about a blackout. And of course, a blackout, or in this case, an outage, would be connected to the eclipse code. The words outage and eclipse, both with the same Gematria, 69. Another thing I want to touch on is that in my most recent video, I talked about how Nicki Minaj appeared at Turning Point USA in Phoenix on Sunday, December 21st. And in that video, I talked about how it was all connected to Jackie Kennedy, who wore pink on the Friday her husband was assassinated. Nicki Minaj has 2 albums named Pink Friday, one of which was released on the anniversary of the JFK assassination. So I picked up on this big Kennedy riddle for Sunday, December 21st. Well, on that same day, December 21st, the Pittsburgh Steelers were in Detroit to play the Lions. And during the game, wide receiver DK Metcalf got in an altercation with a fan, which led to a 2-game suspension. And it just so happens that that fan's name was Ryan Kennedy. Now, the name Kennedy has reverse gematria of 666. DK Metcalf was born 6,606 days after Ron Artest. Ron Artest was the player suspended for nearly a year for his activity in the famous Malice at the Palace, which was a huge brawl, which also happened in the city of Detroit, where DK Metcalf got suspended. So I just want to focus on that real quick, talk about how this Kennedy riddle was very, very real for Sunday. So let's get into the numerology here and talk about how this is connected to the NFL at large. In particular, the Green Bay Packers, who suffered a devastating loss to the Chicago Bears on Saturday night, just as the San Francisco Blackout was starting to make headlines in the mainstream media. The Green Bay Packers had a legendary head coach named Vince Lombardi, the man who the Lombardi Trophy is named after, the winner of Super Bowls 1 and 2. And I picked up on this whole thing with Vince Lombardi even before I realized that this Call of Duty creator's name, to die in the crash, his name is also Vince. So we have this Vince Zampella, Vince Lombardi, and we're going to be talking about San Francisco. Now, in 2023, I made a video on the death of Tony Bennett, who was best known for the song I Left My Heart in San Francisco. And Tony Bennett's real last name was Benedetto. So Tony Bennett, Vince Zampella, Vince Lombardi, all Italians. And Italy is home to the Vatican, which just elected the new pope. Check out how the phrase blackout has the same gematria as Italians. 85 and 131 in the reverse and ordinal methods. Pope Leo the 14th, also 131 reverse. And if you just call him the Pope, it's also 85, matching both Italians and blackout. So that's what we're going to be focusing on, and how this is all connected to the Great American Total Solar Eclipse last year, which passed over the city of Buffalo, home to the Bills, where O.J. Simpson spent his career. The city of San Francisco, which hosts the Super Bowl this year, is home to the 49ers, and the 49ers played on Monday Night Football this past weekend against the Indianapolis Colts. That's interesting because Indianapolis was also in the path of that very same eclipse. And if you've been watching my work lately, I've done a couple videos on Phillip Rivers, the Colts quarterback who came back, and how that's all been connected to the papacy as well. Now, just think about this for a second, right? San Francisco, which is where O.J. Simpson was born, is now 11-4 on the NFL season. The Buffalo Bills, the team that O.J. played for, is now also 11-4. The LA Chargers, the team that Phillip Rivers used to play for, is now 11-4. And the Chicago Bears are 11-4. Chicago, home to the Pope, and the team that defeated the Packers on the same day as the blackout. Now, if you look at the number 114, we find that the 114th prime number is 619. This power outage was 619 days after the death of O.J. Simpson and 6 months and 19 days before his next birthday, July 9th. Now, this is intriguing because O.J. was born a span of exactly 619 weeks before Nicole Brown Simpson, who he was accused of murdering. His full name, Orenthal James Simpson, equals 114. In reduction, San Francisco 49ers also equals 114 to match their current record on the season. Now, no two teams have had more playoff games against each other in NFL history than the 49ers and Green Bay Packers. So you could say that these two teams are bitter playoff rivals. Check out how old Vince Lombardi would have been for Saturday's blackout. 41,100 days old, which is this 114 in reverse. By the way, the 619 area code is San Diego, which used to be home to the Chargers, one of the 11-4 teams. So Vince Lombardi with this digits in his age. And no two teams have played more regular season games against each other than the Packers and Bears. So you could say that this is the most storied regular season rivalry. And again, on the same night as the blackout, the Packers collapsed in the fourth quarter, choking away a game against the Bears. Notice how these numbers connect to Vince Zampella, who reportedly died in a Ferrari crash in the state of California the very next day as power was being restored to San Francisco. Now, I don't want to get too sidetracked here, but there is video of this crash. However, in the year 2025, something seems off about the footage. Maybe a little suspicious. I don't know. Watch it yourself. Do your own homework. It just doesn't seem right. Something's very off. Well, if you look at the gematria of Ferrari, you get 114 reverse. And Vince Zampella was exactly 1,411 weeks older than Ferrari F1 driver Charles Leclerc. I actually mentioned Charles Leclerc in my video on Greg Biffle, because just like Leclerc, Biffle drove the number 16 car. And if you look at how old Charles Leclerc was for Biffle's plane crash, he was exactly 1,470 weeks old, which is the Latin value of Greg Biffle. So let's look at the age of Pope Leo for this blackout. And this is a very important alignment. On December 20th, not only was Pope Leo 3,666 weeks old, but he was also 25,666 days old. Now remember, the name Kennedy has that gematria of 666. Kennedy was the first Catholic pope, or president, I should say. The city of San Francisco is also home to Kamala Harris. And notice how the power outage was 411 days after Kamala Harris's presidential chances were blacked out in the 2024 election. Harris would have been exactly 734 months old on Saturday. The words electricity and the city of San Francisco both have gematria of 734. So let's dive deeper into this connection with the Packers, the team that collapsed as this power outage happened. Now, you could argue that the real coding was for a bridge collapse, but this is how numerology works, right? We get a symbolic connections in connected events in different parts of the country. The Green Bay Packers franchise age matched San Francisco power outage and blackout. 106 years, 131 days. But what's more important to me is that this happened 6 months and 9 days after the birthday of Vince Lombardi. The word outage equals 69 ordinal, and electricity is 69 in reverse reduction. When the sun is outed by the moon, it's called an eclipse, which equals 69, like eclipse of the sun or eclipse the sun. The Green Bay Packers' loss on Saturday night to the Chicago Bears was their 609th loss in franchise history. And in reduction, Green Bay Packers equals 69. Now, if you happen to be new here, I'm probably getting a little ahead of you. These base 4 methods of Gematria are what we focus on primarily, using the alphabetic order. This also feeds into the Latin and standard methods, which produce much larger numbers. Now, the Green Bay Packers, as the most successful team in the history of the NFL, are often connected to riddles, particularly of the Catholic Church. Bishop of Rome, the Jesuit Order, and Catholic Church all sum to 69 in reduction. And this is a riddle I've been following for many years. At the end of 2022, we had the death of Pope Benedict XVI. And in my work on his death, I pointed out how it was all connected to the city of Green Bay, Wisconsin, as he died on the first date with 85 numerology in 3 decades. Green Bay, Wisconsin, home to the most successful team in the National Football League, which sums to 85 like the Pope and Christ. Pope Benedict died on 12/31, which is also the Latin value of Wisconsin, and his last name, Ratzinger, matches Wisconsin as well. So again, just illustrating how these riddles constantly go through the Green Bay Packers. Now, this blackout was 155 weeks exactly after the death of Pope Benedict. This is like the Latin gematria of the Packers quarterback Jordan Love, which sums to 1550. Of course, in Christianity, Jesus is love. Christianity also with this 155 ordinal gematria. We'll talk a bit about NASA as we go as well. And just think about the name Benedict. It's not that dissimilar from the last name Benedetto, who again has this connection to the city San Francisco through his most popular single. So we saw the 666 alignments with the Pope for this blackout. 666, the sum of the magic square of the sun. And that's important to Leo, as the sign of Leo in astrology is the only one ruled by the sun. When Leo became the Pope, it was less than a month after San Francisco turned 175 years old. And the word Pope in Latin is 175. And look at the score for the Packers-Bears game the night of the blackout. This game finished with a score of 22-16. 22-16, huh? Well, in my very first post on the election of the new American Pope, I have an entire section about the number 22-16. And there's a lot of reasons for this. Aaron Rodgers, his first game for the Jets after getting traded from the Packers or leaving the Packers, that game ended with a score of 22-16. We had a plane crash of Flight 2216 at the end of last year. The Pope was born 2216 lunar phases after the United States was founded. And when he became the Pope, one of his hometown Chicago baseball teams, the Cubs, they were 22-16. So then, on the night of the blackout, by the bridge, like how the Pope is the bridge builder, we get this game 22-16 in overtime, of course. Now, Chicago is also the birthplace of a man named Charles Kirk. Notice how Charles Kirk is 22-16 using the reverse standard cipher. His assassination, certainly the biggest news story of 2025. Now, next up, I want to talk about the number 21. This Saturday night tilt between the Packers and Bears was the 210th meeting all-time between the two teams. This is the most between any teams in the history of the NFL. Well, in the alphabetic order, San Francisco, California equals 210. The city was 2,100 months old when Leo became Pope. His real name, Robert Prevost, sums to 210 using capital letters. This blackout in the city of San Francisco was exactly 21 lunar phases, or synodic months, after the Great American Eclipse of 2024, a synodic month measuring the time between each new moon. This blackout was also 20 months and 10 days after the death of San Francisco native O.J. Simpson. It was also 2 years and 10 weeks after Yale University turned 322. In Gematria, the word moon equals both 21 and 210. NASA founded on the 210th day of the year, exactly 2,101 weeks before Jordan Love's 21/1 birthday, or 2/11 to be more precise. And again, NASA responsible for the moon landing in 1969. Jordan Love has reduced birth numerology of 21. And before I forget, I should check out Jordan Love's record. Okay, so it was his 21st non-win in that game against Chicago. I knew there was going to be a 21. He's 27-20-1 now. Anyway, the 21st square number is 441. Okay? Now, Tony Bennett, the guy who sang "I Left My Heart in San Francisco," notice how he died on the 21st day of the month? The song Tony Bennett, "I Left My Heart in San Francisco" sums to 441 in the alphabetic order. And Jordan Love was born exactly 441 months after this song was released. And think about it, his name is Love, the symbol of love, the heart. 441 is also the ordinal value of National Aeronautics and Space Administration, the nickname for NASA. Well, real name for NASA. So just look at this. "I Left My Heart in San Francisco" was released on the 33rd day of the year, which sometimes leaves 333 days left in the year. It was exactly 330 sidereal months after the Golden Gate Bridge opened. The Golden Gate Bridge is literally on the cover of this single. Leo the 14th equals 33 and 30. And Leo the 14th was 2,333 days old, or 333 weeks and 3 days old for the song's release. The blackout was 23,333 days, or 3,333 weeks after the song came out. And guys, don't forget, this all connects to O.J. Simpson. Orenthal James Simpson has this 3,030, right? He's known as the Juice. His last name's Simpson, 33, just like his middle name, James. O.J. Simpson was also born during Brown Lunation 303. Well, if you measure from O.J.'s death to the opening of the Golden Gate Bridge, or the construction date of the Golden Gate Bridge, you get 33,333 days. O.J. Simpson was even born 4,333 days before Nicole Brown, his ex-wife. And she was born 3,333 days before Ronald Goldman, who also died with Nicole Brown. San Francisco Blackout equals 333 in reverse, which is also Green Bay Packers with capital letters. The Sun and Sun both equal 33, like the Pope in Satanic. The Call of Duty creator Vincent Walter Zampella 330, like Vincent Thomas Lombardi, the Packers coach. Eclipse also equals 33 and 192, and Lombardi would have been 192 days after his birthday for this blackout. Now, I also want to point out how this is synced up with the Jesuit order. Now, the Jesuits use an emblem that is very similar to a solar eclipse. And I do not believe this is a mistake. The numbers support me. The Jesuit order has matching 177 Gematria with Eclipse of the Sun. Notice how the Jesuits were formed 177,227 days before the blackout. 227 is the Society of Jesus in Latin ordinal. And when the Jesuits first met, it was on the 227th day of the year. 227 is total eclipse in Hebrew. Now, in the year 2027, there will be a total solar eclipse over the nation of Egypt. This is a very significant eclipse. It lasts very long, several minutes. This blackout was 19 months and 13 days before that eclipse in 2027. And this points us back to Vince Lombardi, who was born in the year 1913. 1913 is the 293rd prime number, which is the value of Green Bay using Fibonacci numbers. And when Vince Lombardi died, he was 20,903 days of age. The number 293 is the 62nd prime number, and Vince Lombardi was exactly 6 years and 2 months older than the Packers. 62, also the year that Left My Heart came out. Pope Leo has double Gematria of 620 for the record. 6 years and 2 months is also 74 months. And 74 is the ordinal value of Lombardi. Lombardi also equals 142. And the Packers were founded on the date leaving 142 days in the year. So Vince Lombardi, man, I mean, you know, there's a reason why he was the Packers coach and that he was the one chosen to lead Green Bay to their initial Super Bowl success. So we've been talking a lot about the Packers, but what about the team that is actually from San Francisco, the 49ers? Now, the 49ers won their 641st game in franchise history on Monday night. And this is the 116th prime number. The number 116, the first to match Jesus in Latin. And again, this is all about the Society of Jesus, the Son of God. The phrase bridge builder equals 116. And this blackout was 116 days before the anniversary of San Fran, which equals 116, just like Jordan Love and Packers, both 116, which, by the way, is an upside-down 9/11. A lot of Christians believe Jesus was born on 9/11, September 11th. St. Vince and St. Vince Lombardi both also equal 116. I point this out because there's this character in Green Bay who dresses up in this papal garb and pays tribute to St. Vince. Now, back in 2022, I made this post talking about how Vince Lombardi, who was born on the date 11/6, the 11th of June, his death was a riddle connected to the end of Solar Saros 116. Every eclipse belongs to a certain Saros series, and each series lasts about 1,300 years. And in 1971, Saros 116 ended. And it's still to this day the last Saros to end. The next one to end is in 2054. So, as far as eclipses go, this was a significant event. And it was all synced up with the death of Vince Lombardi. He died 10 months, 19 days before that. Again, all of this work is linked in my posts. The blackout in San Francisco was exactly 673 lunar phases after the end of Saros 116. 673 is the 122nd prime number. And this is a huge number to the city of San Francisco, which equals 122. Remember, San Francisco sits on the 122nd meridian. And the date of this power outage was 12/20, a lot like the number 122. The word bridge also 122, like Tony Bennett's full name. When O.J. Simpson died, it was exactly 1,220 sidereal months after Golden Gate Bridge construction began. The date of this power outage had primary numerology of 77. Notice how the word power equals 77. This was 7 years, 70 days after the release of First Man, which is about the moon landing. Moon equals 77, like Robert Prevost. Also notice how Prevost and Call of Duty both equal the 77th prime number in the prime number cipher. And we haven't even gotten to the death of the Call of Duty guy yet, but so much to talk about. San Francisco power outage also has matching 1771 gematria with Green Bay, Wisconsin, which in turn matches San Francisco, 202. And this is the next number we're going to focus on, right? Green Bay, Wisconsin, San Francisco, bitter playoff rivals, both with 202 gematria. 22, the number of players on the field in the National Football League, which equals 220. Also 122. total solar eclipse is 202, like Skull and Bones and Ritual Human Sacrifice. Saturday's power outage was 202 days before O.J. Simpson's birthday. The Pope was elected on a date with 22 numerology. Vince Lombardi had 22 birth numerology. I Left My Heart in San Francisco was even released on February 2nd, or 2-2, which also had numerology of 22. And then the singer Tony Bennett would later die on the 202nd day of the year, which was 202 days after the death of Pope Benedict. Again, Benedetto, Benedict. O.J. Simpson was born on 7/9, and 79 is the 22nd prime number. This is the number of lunar phases between the birth of the Pope and the release of Tony Bennett's song. Saturday's blackout was also 20,607 days after the moon landing. And Leo XIV is the 267th Pope, which connects to Golden Gate Bridge, and 49ers. Of course, the 49ers named after the gold rush of 1849. It was also exactly 677 months after the moon landing. That's the 123rd prime number, like the Golden Gate. The number 123 also connects to Kamala, who has a special connection to the moon landing. And remember, when Kamala could have become president had she won the election, it was exactly 666 months after the moon landing. Like National Aeronautics and Space Administration. All right, so to wrap this video up, I want to talk about Vince Zampella, the Call of Duty creator, who was killed in a car crash in Los Angeles County on December 21st. Like I said earlier, this was happening as power was being restored to the city of San Francisco. Notice how Vince Zampella was born on October 1st of 1970. This means he was born less than 1 month after the death of Vince Lombardi. Vince Lombardi died on a date with primary numerology of 101. Well, 101 is a lot like October 1st, which is the birthday of Vince Zampella, 10/1. 10/1 is also the date that NASA began operations in 1958. The organization that gave us the moon landing, if you believe it. Now, for the record, the death of Vince Lombardi was a riddle for the national anthem. The word anthem equals 101. It became the national anthem during Lunation 101. The Pope's name also equals 101. Pope is 11. And Saturday left 11 days in the year. But here's the big alignment for Vince Zampella that everyone needs to understand. When Vince died, he was exactly 20,170 days old, which was also his age for the power outage if you include the end date. Now, this here represents the number 2017. And 2017 was the year of the first Great American Total Eclipse. Well, if you measure from the date of the 2017 eclipse to the date of Zampella's fatal crash, It was a span of exactly 8 years and 4 months later. It was also 804 days after Yale's Skull and Bones anniversary. 804 is the Latin gematria of Call of Duty, the game he was known for developing. And this eclipse was over the United States of America, which equals 84. Solar eclipse and total lunar eclipse both equal 804. The new Pope, Pope Leo, is 84. This is all synced up with the Green Bay Packers, which has double gematria of 84. This also brings us to the Jesuits. The Jesuit order, the Jesuits, Skull and Crossbones, and Skull and Bones, all 8-4. Saturday's power outage was 84 days after the Jesuits' founding date. If you include the end date, it was also 85 days later. Well, Vince Zampella was born 8,485 days after O.J. Simpson. And 85 is the value of blackout, total solar eclipse, the Pope, Rich Bisaccia, who's the special teams coach in Green Bay that everyone wants fired because of their collapse against Chicago. Green Bay, Wisconsin, 85. Vince Lombardi died a span of 85 days after his birthday. I Left My Heart in San Francisco was released on a date with 85 numerology. Pope Benedict dead on the first 85 date in 3 decades. The blackout was even 1,085 days after the death of Joseph Alois Ratzinger, a.k.a. Pope Benedict, whose name also equals 1805. Next up, I want to talk about the number 12, because this has always been important to Vince Lombardi, and we see this number manifest again. We start with the fact that Leo the 14th is 286 in prime numbers, okay? Well, the 286th prime number is 1871, which is the gematria of both San Francisco power outage and the Society of Jesus. This outage was exactly 12 weeks after the Jesuits' anniversary. It happened during the 12th month on a date with numerology of 12 in the city of San Francisco, California, which equals 102. Vince Zampella was born exactly 12 years to the day after NASA began operations. His birth was also exactly 12 weeks after O.J. Simpson's birthday, when Simpson was 1,212 weeks old. 1212 is also total solar eclipse in Sumerian. Nicole Brown Simpson was born on a date with 102 numerology. Vince Lombardi had birth numerology of 12. Vincent Thomas Lombardi and United States of America both 102. And then think about how Vince Lombardi went on to win Super Bowls 1 and 2. And both of those Super Bowls were played on a date with numerology of 102. And then Lombardi died exactly 12 weeks after his birthday. 12 and Leo the 14th, a super match in the base methods. And of course, 12 is also an important number to the moon, which typically orbits the Earth 12 times a year. Luna sums to 12. Now, the moon element of this riddle seems to go through this movie that came out in 2018 called First Man, where Ryan Gosling plays the most attractive astronaut, I guess, in the history of NASA. I'm not being the judge of that. But anyway, this movie came out on October 12th of 2018. And notice how this was 6 years, 6 weeks, and 6 days after the death of Neil Armstrong. And check out the gematria of first man. Notice how it sums to 116 in the reverse alphabetic order. Now, this was a number we focused on earlier, but in the standard alphabetic order, first man equals 100. Vince Zampella was born on a date with primary numerology of 100. The first Call of Duty game came out during Brown lunation number 1000. Zampella then died exactly 100 months after the 2017 Great American Eclipse. Zampella was exactly, or not exactly, but he was 576 months old when First Man was released. 576 is the Latin value of first moon landing. And the first moon landing happened during Brown lunation 576. Well, Vince Zampella died during Brown lunation 1274. That stands out because he was born on the 274th day of the year during Brown lunation 591. The blackout in San Francisco was 591 days before the 2027 total eclipse. Golden Gate Bridge and Jesuit, both 591. The 591st composite number is also the date of the moon landing, 720. So it just seems like there's something strong with the moon here and these Brown lunation numbers, as there so frequently is. And speaking of the moon, Zampella was exactly 683 lunar phases old when he died. This is the value of the Golden Gate in reverse satanic. It's also the 124th prime number, like San Francisco power outage. Vince Zampella was born exactly 1,969 weeks after Golden Gate construction began. And that is, of course, the year of the moon landing. Notice how Society of Jesus is also 1969 in reverse gematria. The Golden Gate Bridge, Bridge Builder, First Man, San Fran. All digits connecting to the year 1969, I guess you could say. So yeah, this video went a little deep, but that's what we got to do, you know, because the longer I do this, the more sizable of a library I have to refer to in the past. And with this being connected to the Green Bay Packers and Vince Lombardi, you know, then we get the death of this guy named Vince. Blackout matching Italians and the Pope. It just makes too much sense. And of course, we would see a lot of the same numbers, right? 12 being a great example, or 84, right? Down in the description below, you'll find links to a couple of related videos, as well as a few posts I made that are all connected to this topic. I'll add a few more after this video as well. And yeah, I do agree. There was something very suspicious about that car crash. If I had to bet if it was real, I would bet everything I have that it wasn't. But that's just me. You know, I'm not the best person to ask as far as, you know, things like the history of the Jesuits I'm no more well-read than the average conspiracy researcher. What I will say about this is that I don't believe it's the Jesuits doing this stuff by the numbers. If someone is responsible for this, they are simply paying tribute to the numerology of the Jesuit order. And that has to do with their special alignment for this date. The 177227. These are both eclipse numbers connected to the Society of Jesus. So it's almost like there had to be a large news event connected to the Jesuits, which use the eclipse for their symbolism, and we get a blackout. In my view, and maybe I'm wrong, but all of these secret societies, the Jesuits, the Freemasons, Skull and Bones, etc., they all operate under the same umbrella. They are arms of the same, 300 armed beast. And the rituals we see aligned with their numerology are simply done by the same people who are using these societies to blame or distract from the truth, which is that there's one big, large club at the very top. And, 2025, it's an interesting time. We're starting to see this kind of dissolve into clarity through our government. And I say that because, the government's full of a bunch of conspiracy theorists now. And a lot of them are still trying to push the mainstream narrative and the entire government power authority illusion. But you can tell that not a lot of them are as committed to it or something. As if they sense that people have kind of woken up to the sham behind it. But they are obligated by oath to continue the charade. And as long as their pocketbooks are getting filled, they don't really care any otherwise. So that's kind of my take on it in general. I'm not going to sit here and explain the history of these organizations. There's other researchers who are much better at that than I am. My work is a little bit niche, focusing on numerology, astrology, synchronicity. That's what I enjoy. The history is for other people to read. And it's funny, if you read my own personal astrology, and it's kind of embedded into me that I don't care about written history and all this stuff. I want to move things forward. And that's why I laugh when people call me so smart. I mean, a part of my brain is pretty smart, but I wish I had more patience to read, that's for sure. And I encourage anyone watching too to, use the calculator and kind of dig into the numbers of your own name. And I think you'll find some fascinating things. For instance, my name, 142, like Gematria. And I did not know this when I first started building Gematria calculators. But my first name matches numbers. My last name matches letters. You combine them, you get Gematria. Just like you combine my name, you get 142. And that's just scratching the surface, I'm teaching you guys about the Brown lunation number. I was born during lunation 772. My name in standard Gematria is 772. My last name also equals the moon, which is the primary focus of my research. So, yeah, I mean, we're all connected to this. And perhaps, just throwing one of my wacky theories out there, perhaps these secret societies aren't necessarily groups of people, but are representative of some type of egregore that's been unleashed into the digital matrix that we inhabit. And that these things kind of have a life of their own. And I do actually believe that to a certain extent. But that's a topic for another video. Maybe I'll get more philosophical as I continue to age into my 40s. But for now, I think the best content I can give you is raw numerology. And yeah, I don't speculate on sports, guys. Look, there is numerology in sports, and I do believe you can use numerology to give you an edge in sports betting, but it's never a guarantee, and it's a very frustrating endeavor. Speculating on sports drives me a little bit crazy because I have such an eye for different numbers at this point that I get lost very easily. So I know last year I did a big breakdown once the playoffs started about what I thought was going to happen, and then pretty much that's exactly what happened. So maybe I'll do that again, but do I think the 49ers are going to win the Super Bowl in their home stadium? I don't think so. I don't think they'll make it. But again, I haven't really dug yet, so thanks for the kind words, Dr. Savage. In my mind anyway, and hopefully in the mind of many, their perception of the world has at least changed. I don't know how much the calculator has changed the world. I mean, I still drive a car on 4 wheels. I still have to go grocery shopping like everyone else. We still have crappy politicians in office, but no, I appreciate it, man. All right, so thanks to everybody who made it in. If you're watching live or archived, do feel free to like, share, subscribe, etc. If you want to become a member of the website, that'll help support the work and give you various perks on gematrinator.com. Next month, we will be releasing some awesome upgraded software that I'm really excited to announce. And yeah, that's almost ready. So I'll be coming online in the next couple of weeks to talk about that as we dig deeper into the astrological and synchromistic side of things. Peace, love, God bless, and we'll talk to you next time. See ya.